Hey guys, how's it going? So today I want to bring a simple question to your mind. Do you think the M1A is overpowered? Now obviously this question is a weapon balance question, so we're going to be looking at stats more in depth later in the video, but just think to yourself, would you rather use any other marksman rifle rather than the M1A? Now if your answer was no, you're probably aware of how great a weapon the M1A is. In fact, it's not only superior to the semi-automatic marksman rifles, but also superior to the bolt-action ones. So now we're actually going to compare the stats of the competing weapons. So up against the first wave M1A, we have a SOCOM MK20 SSR. These are both semi-automatic marksman rifles, and you probably recognize the MK20 because I did a video on this gun earlier. And that video was me basically trying to find anything that the MK20 has over the M1A. And not to my surprise, the comments consisted of, no way, the MK20 cannot even compare to the M1A. The M1A is superior in basically every category. And from various different resources, I quickly learned that you can't compare the M1A with any other marksman rifle, so let's look at that now. So obviously the first thing you look at when you pick up a weapon is either its DPS or its damage per shot in this case. Now obviously, as this being a loot-based game, the variation can differentiate between weapons, but let's cast that aside for a second and just look at the stats. Now we are comparing the unmodded versions of the M1A and the MK20. And as you can see, the M1A clearly is the winner in damage per shot, leading by over 10,000. The M1A also has a higher RPM by 25 rounds per minute, however it has a magazine half the size of the MK20. And most of you probably already know that bit by now, but what's interesting is the DPSs for each weapon is slightly unexpected. Even though the M1A is leading in the damage and RPM category, it actually has lower DPS than the MK20. And if you're wondering why this is, it's simply because the MK20 has a 20-round magazine instead of the 10-round magazine native to the M1A. And this affects the DPS because you can actually do more damage before reloading with the MK20. If you're to compare one magazine of the M1A versus one magazine of the MK20 is going to be superior. However, if you compare 10 rounds of the M1A and 10 rounds of the MK20 is going to be the winner. So simply put, if you include the magazine size in the DPS, the MK20 is going to be victorious, whereas if you exclude the magazine size, the M1A is going to come out on top. However, what I'm going to do now is make the magazine of the M1A as close to 20 rounds as I possibly can. Luckily, I have a 91.5% magazine size increase, and that bumps it up to 1 round short of 20 rounds. Now this magazine, as you can see, did actually increase the damage of my weapon, and that's simply because there is a damage factor on the magazine. It increases my weapon damage by 13.5%, and this is why the damage went up from 29,000 to 33,000, but if you look at the DPS, we're now way above the SOCOM MK20. And that's funny because all we did was really increase the magazine size to just about 20 rounds. Now as you saw, by increasing the magazine to 19 rounds, the DPS flew way up, way over the MK20, and this proves the M1A is superior compared to the MK20. So now if you see, I'm actually comparing the M1A to a classic M44 carbine. And as you may already know, the M44 carbine is a bolt-action sniper rifle. And this inherently means the RPM is much, much lower than a semi-automatic marksman rifle. With that being said, the damage per shot is only 10,000 more than the damage per shot of the M1A. And this is very shocking because the RPM is literally 6 times slower. It also has a smaller magazine of 5 compared to the 10 of the M1A. So without doing any calculations, you can easily see the M1A severely outclasses the M44 carbine. And this goes about the same way for other M44 variants as well as the SRS variants. Now just for a second, let's forget about magazine size and let's also forget about DPS. Let's purely focus on damage per shot as well as the RPM of both the M1A and the M44 carbine. So in order for the M44 carbine to be equal in damage to the M1A, you would actually have to have the damage of the M1A be 6 times the amount for the M44 carbine. So even more so than other semi-auto marksman rifles, the bolt-action marksman rifles are definitely outclassed and they're definitely unbalanced compared to the M1A. So with all of that being said and done, it's really up to you guys in the comments that I'm asking. Do you think the M1A is too powerful? Should the M1A receive a nerf in order to be equal to other marksman rifles? Or should everything else receive a buff in order to equal the M1A? In my personal opinion, I think the M1A should be nerfed, because if you look at the flip side, if you buff every single marksman rifle, as well as the M1A being powerful as it is already, every other weapon class in the game is going to be much less powerful compared to the marksman rifles. And I would say in the division there's really only a couple of weapon balance issues, the M1A being one of the most severe, so nerfing down the M1A, in my personal opinion, is the best way to go about weapon balance. And I'm perfectly fine with getting a lot of hate for saying this because I myself am an M1A user, but the way I see it right now is the M1A is the only way to go when choosing a marksman rifle, and I would actually like to have more variation with my use of marksman rifles. So if they were all pretty much equal to each other with minor pros and cons, that would be much better than just one weapon to use all the time. And this is why there's not one assault rifle and one SMG and one LMG and one shotgun in the division. If that were the case, people would get bored because there was no variation. And that's pretty much the problem with the M1A. It's the only marksman rifle you can use when doing tougher missions. So hopefully you guys understand my reasoning and the proof that goes behind it statistically. Now if you have any questions about the video or in general, feel free to leave them in the comments as well as your own opinions. I'm very curious at what you guys have to say. And this about wraps up the video, guys, so hopefully you enjoyed. If you did, make sure you leave a like, share, and subscribe for daily content, and I'll see you guys later. Thanks for watching.